Welcome to episode 2. This is a sustainability podcast by Mox Clerk and Future Fashion Factory. So we've teamed up to present a series of podcast episodes which focus on issues of sustainability within the fashion and textiles industry.
Today's episode is specifically about data-driven design, and we're basically looking at it in terms of fashion sustainability. Just the structure of the podcast today, we are lucky enough, obviously we have myself and Rayanne, we both work within the IP field. Rayanne is a IP solicitor, whereas I'm a qualified IP solicitor in South Africa, and I'm now requalifying as a trademark attorney in the UK. We also have Cherie and Penwa who have come to join us today, so we're really excited about that. Thanks, guys. Cherie is from Visualist, and Penwa is a PhD student who is working behind the scenes on everything, and she'll tell you a bit more about that a bit later on. So for now, just diving straight in, Cherie and Penwa, do you just want to introduce yourselves, give us 1 to 2 sentences about why you're passionate about sustainability in the fashion sector, and then obviously tell us a bit about data-driven design and how things are working at the moment.
Sure. Thank you very much, Rayanne and Noel, for the introduction. So I am Cherie. I am the founder of Visualist, which is a SaaS product targeting creatives, particularly those in the fashion and design industries. In terms of my interest in sustainability, I think it really stems from the fact that I think we all know fashion is one of the most polluting industries globally. And what I'm really interested in is thinking about how we can use digital tools to allow the whole fashion process to use resources more efficiently and more mindfully in all stages of the process. It could be things like 3D design, or it could be things like using collaborative and productivity tools like Visualist to save time, to cut waste, to reduce trouble. So all of those things, I think, really feed into.
And ultimately, I think also the other thing is ultimately to make it more cost effective as well. I mean, if you're cutting out certain production processes, it would also ultimately make it a lot more cost effective for businesses, which in the long run would create or hopefully promote sustainability within the fashion sector, because then at least everyone's also making some money from it.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And I think going to your point about data-driven design, what that means to me really is making informed design decisions, which are underpinned by research that we get, insights that we get from speaking to our target audiences, which may be quantitative data or it may be qualitative data. So that's really that focus on consumers that we are having in mind whenever we are designing our product and developing our product.
Sure.
So Penwa, give us a little bit of an intro and tell us what's been going on and why you're passionate about sustainability in fashion.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. Hi, I'm Pei Hua, and I'm a PhD researcher at the University of Leeds. And my research is located on the data-driven color design, especially in color forecasting and nowcasting in fashion. I enjoy being trendy person, but also cares a lot about the sustainability. So I need to find a way to balance between them. As we all know that the massive data flow online each fashion weeks. So the data-driven design for me is to help me to target the right color insights from the fashion show and make the color decision when I'm doing the shopping. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Which ultimately creates the sustainability, and as we mentioned earlier, just makes it easier for everyone to make fashion more sustainable in the long run.
Yeah. Do you guys want to give a brief introduction of the kind of things you're working on right now?
Sure. So Visualist, as I mentioned, is a SaaS product, and what we really want to do is help creatives to manage their digital inspiration or their visual libraries more efficiently, and also collaborate with other creators more delightfully. So we are a startup in London. Our app is a cloud-based product. It is currently in private beta. And recently, we have been working with Future Fashion Factory and specifically Leeds University to help with developing our color detection algorithms. So I think there are a lot of synergies with what Peihua is doing. We unfortunately are not working with Peihua, but we are working with another researcher at Leeds University. So I think just to sum it up, our aim is to be able to better detect colors in the images that our users are storing in Visualist. So Visualist is a library for users to keep their inspiration that they have collected on the web. And once anything is saved into Visualist, we automatically detect keywords using object detection, image recognition, and we also detect color. So we assign color swatches to each image. And the thing is, when the algorithm is looking at an image to detect the color, it's not as simple as determining, oh, how much red is there in this color, is there in this picture, and I'm going to tag it as red. That's not the case, because what the human sees and what is important to the human can be completely different to what is the presence of a color in an image. So what we want to be able to do better is be able to detect what is representative. What are the colors that are representative of that image to a human? What are the colors that are most important to a human? And why do we want to do that? I think there are usually two things that we want to achieve. So we want to let users retrieve their images more easily. And to do that, you can either search by keyword or you can search by colors in Visualist. So I might search for black jumper, or I might search for a red dress, or I might just toggle and use a color dropper tool to search for a color, and my results that are returned would be based on the colors that have been detected as being part of that image. So in that instance, the more accurate we can detect which colors are representative, the more easily we can return the correct results for users. Secondly, so sometimes you want to look, but you don't want to search. So keyword search and like specific color swatching search presumes that you have something in mind that you're looking for, but sometimes you just want to browse and meander and get inspiration. And then in those instances, we want to let colors be the guardrails for that exploration. So for instance, being able to look at things that are of similar colors, or in the longer term, complementary or contrasting colors. So overall, the more accurate we are in being able to assign color swatches to a specific image, the more easily we can help the user achieve what they need, whether it's looking for something specific or whether it's getting inspiration from periphery or doing inspiration-oriented search. And our project with Future Fashion Factory is really about being able to detect these colors better and getting that computer-generated color palette to be as accurate as what a human would generate as a color palette.
Yeah, so that's interesting you say about the collaboration aspect, because oftentimes people hit a bit of a stopping block because there's a reluctance of sharing data and kind of misaligned purposes and misaligned motives, so to speak. So to see that you're kind of both on the same page, and that must have made life a bit easier.
Absolutely, and I think the interesting thing that we're doing with this collaboration, I think it's the way in which we are gathering the data. So when looking at this collaboration or this R&D project, we knew that the thing that we needed to do first and foremost was collect data. So we need to be able to collect human-generated swatches so that we can compare that against computer-generated swatches. Our users mostly fashion creatives and other design creatives, and we were really thinking about what was the best way to be able to collect this data. So we obviously realized that most of them were on Instagram. It's a real good thing, and also can be quite distracting sometimes.
You don't collect data from LinkedIn or, other professional social media tools? No, just
No, we haven't thought about that. I might have to think about that. So what we did was essentially using one of the Instagram features to collect data. So we're not collecting data from Instagram itself, but we are contacting our users via Instagram DM. We send them a picture. We send them a few pictures every week, actually, and we send them a template with circles at the bottom for color swatches, and we say use the eyedropper tool and use the color dropper tool in Instagram stories, pick out the colors from the image, pick out 5 colors from the image, color them into the bottom, the empty circles at the bottom, and send them back to us. So every week we get 3 or 4 image palettes from our users, and then we feed them into the algorithm that has to pick out these colors. Then from there, we essentially examine the data. We look at the color differences between different humans, and we look at the color differences between the human and the computer. So yeah, Instagram has been a fun way for us to collect data. Probably quite a novel way to collect data as well, but it's really about being where our users are and thinking about how we can collect data creatively in a way that is also engaging and effortless to use it.
And fun. Just to explain to some of the people that are listening to the podcast that are maybe not directly within industry, but for example, your end user being a creative, why would they want to use this data? For example, what is the benefit of them finding out what a specific color is or what's better? How would they use it commercially eventually?
Sure. I think for creatives, color is such a big part of the design process. It can usually come right at the beginning. So you might have a color palette that you're working from, and you want to create a collection or a mood board that is based on that color palette. So within Visualist, you are able to then search your library, your personal library, based on colors, and put together a mood board or a vision board that is based on that color palette. So, it's a nice combination of pictures that represent the color palette that you're looking for. Or sometimes you picking things out, and so you're going the other way. You have all of these images and you want to identify what is that commonality across them. It could be colors, it could be patterns, and so it's really coming at colors from different ways. It could be starting using colors as a starting point, or arriving at colors based on images or references that you have collected. Saving time, I think, is the biggest thing, really. When we speak to our users about the different stages in their process and what their biggest needs are, it's always about organizing. So, you don't want to be saving a picture and then having to manually tag every picture with colors or with keywords. So in Visualist, we do all of that automatically for you. And even when it comes to then creating mood boards or creating or managing projects and managing that back and forth, it's really about saving time, making that process much more efficient, and letting technology do the heavy lifting for you when you can, so that you can just focus your time on being creative and really creating work that you're proud of.
Yeah, I think it's very well, to go back a bit of a step. So we're talking about collation, so of data and information here. I think the way you kind of approached it is great, because oftentimes, we've kind of encountered a lot of times having to give advice to help people avoid proprietary issues in and around the data that they utilize, whether that's from a data protection perspective or whether that's from another kind of IP form perspective. So generally kind of gaining data from publicly available information, or, otherwise making very sure that you have the appropriate consent and licenses to be able to do that. And, as a general kind of point, we always kind of say, it's super important to really drill down and get IP professionals like ourselves to kind of, there's a bit of a plug there. I always feel a bit cheesy doing that, but, it's always important to kind of get.
It's a plug, but you have to say it.
It is, I know, but, it's just like, it is important.
Well, you have to say it because, I mean, and this is Ryan and I, before this, we were saying we hate saying things like this because it does sound like a plug. But at the same time, I would honestly say this to my friends. I would say, make sure wherever you're getting the stuff from, you can take it from there. And it's the same with when you're later commercializing something. Make sure all your ducks are in a row and you've made sure that the ownership, I mean, Ryan can comment more on that. The ownership of the IP is correct. Who's going to own the trademarks at the end of the day? Your brand forms such a big part of everything. Just making sure that you've kind of worked it throughout. So, tell us a bit more about let's go back to basics a bit more. Tell us a bit more about the research behind everything and what you've been working on.
Well, so recently working on is trying to build a data-driven system to the customer like me who want to balance the trendy things and the sustainability, and also it might be used for the company, the retail companies. So the overall the data-driven system is trying to help the users to capture the color insights from the fashion images, but not limit to the fashion show. It could be also expanded to the specific period of time duration or event. They could select the time duration through the systems. And why I want to do that? The first is that to help the customers like me to quickly capture the fashion color information. And when I go trying to doing some shoppings, I could get this kind of information and make me easier to make the color decision. And also for the company, this kind of information could help them to make the color related decision because they could know that what is the trendy colors, what is the trendy color from that shows, or what's the trendy color from that period of time, and maybe in some specific city in London or in Paris. So it also helps them to make a less risky decision
And I suppose,
yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose isn't making, not only from a company side, that would be a less risky decision and it would be more cost effective for them. But I suppose the bigger thing is it would promote sustainability because ultimately they're not going to be producing masses of a specific palette or color palette that no one's interested in. They can pretty much take the data that's out there and then
you're really kind of honing in, aren't you? You're honing in on the particular kind of data points that are relevant for what you want to do, rather than just on bulk taking masses of information. So it sounds great.
Yeah, absolutely. And it helped them to decide the product or decide the colors that the consumer would like to buy in the near future. And it helped them to reduce the unsold goods. So it also helps the sustainability in the fashion industry. Yeah.
Sure. To touch on a point Noelle mentioned earlier about kind of putting all your ducks in a row, like it is important. And, this isn't necessarily a plug. This is just quite important to kind of keep at the forefront of your mind from the get-go and make sure, everything that you're bringing in, whether it be data, whether it be other IP rights, make sure that's all kind of in line, even things that are being generated. So we're talking about areas, we won't really delve into software here because I think one of the later episodes, Sampling Without Samples, which is the next episode, delves into much more software-based.
And I think that was a plug.
Was that
I have to call you out.
The problem is, I even did this on it, Sampling Without Samples, and then from a software perspective, so you're building software around this, making sure that you own, what is proprietary in that. There are a whole raft of issues revolving around kind of open source, but just to keep it basic, making sure that the IP rests where you think it rests. So because this is often a problem, people, they think they own the IP, they didn't have a contract in place with a software developer, for example, and now, there's a license there at the best. So, and then even downstream, we're talking about, the collaboration between you guys, making sure that new developments being quite transparent and being quite clear as to where effectively where the ownership lies. Is it jointly held, which we would kind of, and I think you'll struggle to find IP professionals that will really, really encourage generally joint ownership of IP, being clear from the outset and being very transparent as to where that foreground IP, that generated intellectual property right, who owns that, and and why they would own that and why that's more beneficial.
And I think, Shabir, you can comment on this, but I mean, again, this is just something that I think a lot of, in my personal experience, is a lot of startups overlook the simple IP basics right at the beginning. And the truth is, it's essential to actually write it, as Ryan said, right at the beginning, establish who owns what, put it in writing, just have it. It's the same as when everything starts scaling. You want to make sure that you've filed the trademarks, that you've made sure whatever logos you're using with it, whatever name you're calling your product, you've taken care of that so that when you are looking for investment, you're looking for funding, you can use, for example, the trademarks or the IP as security in certain cases, and obviously later to license it out if that's something that you want to do. But it just opens up the options. And I think looking at that from right in the beginning just makes it so much simpler. And I mean, Penwa, you can comment on this. Normally, what happens is at the research stage, we're so excited and we're just, yes, we're getting it done and we're doing all these cool things. And everyone's just so happy. And the problem is all these basic IP things are usually overlooked at this stage. And this is where I just want to throw a big plug out to everyone. Make sure that you just check that everything is sorted and correct so that you can spend all your time focusing on I probably shouldn't say this, but on the very important stuff, which is, for example, your research and making sure that you get everything right.
Sheree, do you find that also on because, from kind of like my experience as well, it's not exclusively to academics. Do you find that on your side as well? Like the overall commercial project takes kind of precedent and, all these kind of intricate legal, I suppose, getting your ducks in a row, for lack of a better term. Do you find that sometimes overlooked? Or do you find you were quite hot on it from the outset?
I have to admit, I have a legal background. Well, in a previous life, I suppose. So from the very beginning, I suppose, lucky in that I have these in my head. So trademarks, assignment agreements, when you have contractors, and it's always important to look at the IP provisions are. Absolutely. So these are definitely things that I guess have been playing in my head from the beginning, and it's so important to get them right from the start so that you don't have to put band-aids over things and try and patch things together in the future when you are going out to raise funding, or when you want to market something and you realize, oh, someone actually is using the name that I thought I could use. I've had friends who have encountered such issues before. So yeah, it's so important to just get the legal stuff taken care of right from the start. I definitely think it pays to bring in a professionals once you can.
I think the other big thing is sometimes, and I mean, this is just in general, is making sure, even if you go see a professional, just to get a strategy to know what you're not doing at this stage or where your risk is, for example. I mean, it's okay if you want to take a risk and you don't want to protect something, or you want to carry on knowing that you're potentially going to have this issue later down the line. But then at least it's not a surprise from out of nowhere. And as you said, something that you have to plug a band-aid over, or otherwise something later that you've been investing for the last 5 or 6 years and you've been working on, and now suddenly you're told, sorry, you can't do this anymore, or sorry, you need to change your name, something, or someone else owns it. I mean, that could just be destroy my heart if I'd been working on something for so long.
No, I think that's a very good point. Particularly for startups, there is that nice to have, and then there's the need to have. So it's really important that you know what you need to do now and what are things that you could possibly punt or take a risk on, because it is a risk that you are comfortable taking. So I completely agree on that front. Yeah.
Yeah, and even kind of from a preparation perspective, if you're thinking, you're preparing for investment or even sale, you don't want to kind of the due diligence from the buyer or the investor to kind of trip you up, and you're like, oh my god, we thought we all. It's so
embarrassing.
Yeah, whatever your strategy is, kind of, if you want longevity for yourself and you have no intent of selling, or if you do, and the idea is to kind of build your whatever it is you're involved in, to build it up to a level where you can sell it on. Having that in mind and having your end goal in mind is kind of so important. I feel, Pehwa, do you find that this kind of comes up in academia as well?
Yeah, but after hearing the discussion between among you guys, I was thinking that I might employ a lawyer when I start up the data-driven system I built. Is it
Hey,
there's a lot of things that I need to be thinking about before
hey,
it's
yeah,
going to the commercial things. Yeah.
hey, we know some people. We know some people, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I
but
mean,
mhm.
yeah, just going back to your main research at the moment. So, what would ultimately, I mean, at the end of the day, what would your ultimate goal be, or what would you be? You'd look back in like 5 years or 6 years, and you're going to go, "Yes, I was involved in that. I changed industry," or what is your main goal at the end of the day?
I think that the end goal is that to build that kind of system to help the consumer to capture the color insight in a quicker way and to balance the trendy clothes and the sustainability. What I mentioned before is that because if you want to be a trendy person, you might need to buy a lot of clothes. As we all know, the
Exactly.
consumer preference and the trends do changes. So we need to catch the trends, but we also need to think about the sustainability. So that kind of data-driven system is to help people to balance these two things, that to catch up the color insight and make the color decision in a quicker and accurate way. Yeah.
Yeah, so Peihua just wants everyone to be sustainable and trendy. I like it. It's a good. It's a good. Oh gosh.
Right.
I know. I really shouldn't kind of break character because we're doing a podcast here. But how are you guys? Just on a tangent, a bit of a tangent question. How are you finding everything working remotely? And I know you've probably heard this question a million times, and you have to answer it all the time. But this is kind of proof of it. How do you find this kind of interaction? Do you feel that collaboration is stifled? Do you find it easier? Like, how do you guys find it?
I think one of the main things is what has been kind of playing on my mind is in terms of going forward with now, as you said, analyzing data in terms of colors and etc. All of this stuff is really done online. So do you find maybe that this environment has made designers a lot more comfortable with working online and dealing remotely? And in a way, it sounds horrible, but if we had to look at the silver lining in COVID, we could almost say it's that now designers have had to take a step back and they've had to do things from home or had to do things remotely instead of flying everywhere in the world and picking up samples and looking at things. So do you think it's kind of put you guys in the right foot for the future?
Yeah. So to answer Noel's question first, yes, I think the answer is yes. We were started. Our startup was founded just before COVID. Then COVID hit, and obviously it was challenging, and it was a lot about adapting quickly to new ways of doing things. But it definitely did, I think, result in a digital turn to working and a digital turn in consumption as well. I mean, our target audience were already doing things online a lot, particularly with research online, Pinterest, Instagram, etc. But with COVID, obviously, everything became about digital collaboration, working collaboratively online, co-creating online together. So in that sense, we definitely have seen that greater demand for tools that enable teams, creative teams, to work collaboratively together, getting on the same page, literally, on the browser and co-creating together. And I think to Ryan's question about how working remotely has been for our team, it's definitely been a lot of, I guess, adapting. I think there are some great tools for working remotely. You know, we use Slack a lot, we use Figma a lot, but I think increasingly what I find is not so much about the tools you use, but it's about creating systems and procedures within your team for understanding what things can be done asynchronously versus what things need to be done live, online, in person, on a call, on a video call. Like, not everything has to be done over a video call. I think we have come to realize that over the last year or so. And I think it's really about finding ways to make things work even when you're not together. And I think it's really about, I think, creating like organizational cultures that can flow from that, rather than, you know, trying to replicate what you do in real life digitally.
Yeah, and it's so important that everyone across, so you know, everyone across the board is kind of adapted in the same way, and I think people have generally, like people are kind of generally coming to terms with this isn't a 3 week lockdown, like we're in this for the, we are in this for the long haul. So you know, everyone seems to have adapted quite well to it, and it's good to hear that kind of your experience is generally quite positive, and as well, you know, hopefully for people you collaborate, you have that kind of synchronization between the two where things do, you know, it's
I
almost
think
seamless.
probably the biggest challenge is you can't engineer serendipity online, right? I think a lot of creativity comes from just being in the same space and then suddenly thinking of something and turning to that person and being like, oh, what do you think about that? And
Sure,
you don't have that
sure.
remotely. So it's about finding new ways to spark that creativity even if you're not together.
Yeah. So hopefully, you know, when things do eventually go back to normal, or whatever normal was, you know, you've now accumulated all these new or developed, you could call them tool sets, a new way of working, and hopefully, you know, in the future, this kind of all comes together and is much more beneficial across the board. What about you, Pei Hua? What about you? How have you found?
Yeah, and for me, before the COVID, I was doing a lot of coding, and after COVID, I'm still doing a lot of coding. So it's not that changed a lot to me, but I just found out that there's a huge demanding for the system I mentioned, because as we all know that the fashion weeks held online recently in few famous fashion weeks. So it's made me think that there's a huge demanding about this data driven system, because
Yeah,
instead of sending the buyers or sending the people to the reality fashion show to find out the color insight, the system I propose is to help them just to analyze the images from the virtual fashion show and get the color insight for them. And I also think that this kind of remote study can help me to rethink that how the essential of these systems need to be done, and it motivate me to just to improve the algorithms that
yeah.
we try to write. Yeah.
And we do
I
live
think
in
it's
such a data-driven kind of world, right? It's and this there's such a focus on the negativity. It's great to see, you know, and not exclusively to this across the board. It's very positive, but you know, you in particular, this is a very positive usage of data and a real positive way to kind of spin it out. You know, as we're talking about sustainability from both a commercial perspective as well as an ethical one. Yeah, it's really good to hear that.
Yeah, it's just made me think that the data driven approach just change the landscape of the fashion industry. Just like the fashion show will be held online, and I think there's a lot of data driven approach was decided recently to help to deal with this kind of situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Noelle and I were talking about, you know, you hear all kinds of kind of initiatives being done by, you know, from across the board, from luxury brands all the way to, you know, there's not talk fast fashion as well, right? So people are really, because there is such a spotlight, I suppose, you know, everybody now is kind of so involved and so, you know, so involved on kind of social media and all these kind of things. Awareness for certain causes are coming to the forefront in a way that arguably they may not have done before. So people having a real spotlight on this is, you know, hopefully on a very positive note, kind of driving industry as well from the right way to kind of do things and really act upon issues of sustainability in this context.
I think with COVID coming in, we were really just starting. We were well, not starting, but we were talking a lot about sustainability in fashion, and kind of with us all having remote working, it really took everyone back, had to rethink, had to relook at what we've been doing. How can we simplify processes? How can we do things better? For example, exactly what your research is doing at the moment, which is Now we don't have to go in person to fashion shows. We can do it online. We can get that data compilated now instead of having to physically go there. We don't need all the time to have physical samples anymore. We can do a lot of this online beforehand. And I think this is where we're all just kind of working at, and COVID just boosted it and made people more comfortable with working online, and this has kind of just heightened it. So it's great. In that
It'd be interesting to kind of see where it goes, right? Like imagine, we're talking about fashion shows and utilizing technology. Like, who knows where it could go? VR headsets or AR, and you've got a fashion, Paris runway going down your desk like this. Like, it's kind of limitless, kind of. So it's positive to see that people are adapting and the industry is adapting in a way that really embraces the circumstances we're in. So yeah, wow, we kind of went on a tangent there, but it's good. That's why I kind of like these, and this is what we really wanted to do these podcasts about, to kind of have real, I suppose, natural conversations about what's going on and how people are finding it and how it's affecting what they're doing on a kind of day-to-day.
I think it's time for us to call it. Do you guys have any last words that you guys would like to comment on anything? Thank you so much for joining us today and just having a casual conversation about what you guys are busy with and what the landscape is kind of looking like at the moment. I feel like we need to have a catch up in 5 years' time and see where you both have gone and what's happened. And then I can say, I know them, yes.
No, we missed on a great question. I've never really heard people ask this. Where do you guys see yourself in 5 years' time? Like, I've never heard people ask this question, right? Oh my God.
No, but it's true. It's especially, I think it's so relevant in this kind of industry because everything is moving so fast and it really is changing so quickly that it's completely changing the way people are doing things. So that's what I get excited about, because now in 5 years' time, I can go, hey, I know Cherie. Tell me about this. Or Penwa was busy with this. And I'll be like, yes. But thank you from Rayan and myself. Thank you so, so, so much for joining us. Rayan, do you want to plug some of our future episodes?
Well, you've kind of set me up now. Well, guys, the next episodes coming up are sampling without samples and recycling and end of life. And the kind of way we've done this is so they kind of feed through to one another, and hopefully, hopefully you guys will join us for those as well. But guys, do you have any other, final things you want to say or kind of comments that you want to make?
I think to echo what Noel said earlier about sustainability and new ways of doing things, I think we are firmly in the edge of acknowledging that a lot of things that previously were done in person, in real life, planning for fashion shoots, planning for fashion shows, those can be done almost virtually now. For London Fashion Week, we worked with a bunch of designers to essentially plan out the whole fashion shoot virtually, digitally, and we had the designers take part in the shoots digitally as well. So they were spread out all over the UK, and the shoots were happening in London. So it was a 100% virtual shoot from the designer's perspectives, and I think you realize how much savings there are in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of waste and materials. And I think we are past that stage of wondering, can this be done virtually? I'm not saying that everything can be done virtually, but I think there is an acknowledgement now that a lot of processes can be streamlined. And digital tools are going to be a big, big part of that. Tools like the ones that Peihua is building, tools like Visualist. And yeah, it's super exciting to see where we'll be going next. And thank you so much for having us on the podcast. It was a pleasure.
Good stuff. Peihua?
And from my side is that I think using the power of the data, we could, maybe one day we could just balance to become a sustainable person and a trendy person.
Yeah, I'm with you.
To buy the right clothes. Yeah, just to buy the right clothes. Yeah, also thank you for having us here.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your time, guys. Yeah, so see you all
Thanks,
next
everyone.
episode.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.